She stood there, $80 maternity dress, dripping with sticky champagne, while the man she vowed to love forever held another woman's waist. The ballroom echoed with cruel laughter. The mistress sneered, calling her a charity case, a stain on the evening's perfection. They saw a broken, exhausted housewife who didn't belong in their world of high-stakes finance and old money. But what none of them knew, not even her husband, was that the very floor they stood on the crystal chandelier, shimmering above their heads, and the bank holding the mistress's family debt, actually belonged to her. This is the story of Sapphira Hayes, and the night the laughter died. The silence in the penthouse wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that screams. Sapphira Miller sat on the edge of the California king bed, the mattress groaning slightly under her shifting weight. At 8 months pregnant, simply existing felt like an Olympic sport. Her ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits, and her lower back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache that no amount of prenatal yoga seemed to fix. She looked at the digital clock on the nightstand, 7:45 p.m. Jason wasn't home. Again. Working late, he had texted at 5 p.m. "Big merger. Don't wait up." Sapphira rubbed her rounded belly, feeling a sharp kick from within. "Daddy's busy again, little bean," she whispered, her voice cracking just a little. She stood up, wincing, and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of their apartment on the Upper East Side. It was a nice apartment, sterile, modern, filled with sharp angles and chrome finishes that Jason loved. It screamed new money. It was the kind of place bought by a man who needed to prove to the world he had arrived. Jason Miller, CEO of Nexus Tech, was the darling of the New York tech scene. Forbes had just listed him as a 30 under 30 to watch. He was charismatic, handsome, in that sharp, hungry way, and utterly obsessed with image. When they had met 3 years ago, he was a struggling coder in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, and Sapphira was just Sapphira, a quiet girl in a knitted cardigan reading worn-out paperbacks. She told him she was estranged from her family, that she freelanced as a copy editor. She never told him her last name was Hayes. She never told him that estranged meant she had walked away from the Hayes Hotel empire because she wanted to be loved for who she was not, for the billions attached to her signature. She had secretly used her trust fund, channeled through a shell company called Aurora Holdings, to provide the angel investment that launched Nexus Tech. Jason thought Aurora was just a faceless venture capital firm that believed in his genius. He didn't know his wife was the board of directors. Sapphira sighed, turning away from the window. She walked into the walk-in closet to find her comfortable slippers, but her foot kicked something hard on the floor. It was Jason's gym bag. He must have dropped it in a rush this morning. She bent down, groaning, to move it out of the way. The zipper was half open. As she lifted it, a heavy cream-colored envelope slid out and landed on the hardwood floor. It wasn't a gym membership renewal. It was thick, textured cardstock with gold leaf edging. Sapphira picked it up. The Obsidian Gala, hosted by the Manhattan Business Alliance venue, the Grand Ballroom, the Hayes Plaza, tonight. 8:00 p.m. Sapphira's breath hitched. The Obsidian Gala was the event of the season. It was where the titans of industry rubbed shoulders. Jason had told her weeks ago that he wasn't invited, that Nexus Tech wasn't big league enough yet. But here was the invitation, addressed to Mr. Jason Miller and guest. And guest? He hadn't forgotten to tell her. He had lied. A cold feeling, colder than the AC in the penthouse, washed over her. Why would he lie? She looked down at herself. She was wearing oversized grey sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. She hadn't coloured her hair in 6 months, afraid of the chemicals affecting the baby. Her face was puffy from water retention. "He's ashamed of me," the thought whispered in her mind. "He wants to be the golden boy, and I look like a tired, pregnant housewife. She should go back to bed. She should cry into her pillow and pretend she never saw it. That's what the old Sapphira, the one hiding from her identity, would do." But then her phone buzzed on the dresser. It was a notification from Instagram. Jason had been tagged in a photo. Sapphira opened the app, her fingers trembling. It was a story posted by Tiffany Sinclair. Tiffany. The name tasted like battery acid. She was the daughter of Robert Sinclair, a real estate mogul who had been loud in the 90s and quiet recently. Tiffany was everything Sapphira wasn't currently: stick-thin platinum blonde, draped in Versace, and constantly hovering around Jason at industry events. The photo was a selfie. Tiffany was in the back seat of a limousine, holding a flute of champagne. Next to her, looking sharp in a bespoke tuxedo, was Jason. The caption read, "On our way to dominate the night. Hashtag power couple. Hashtag Obsidian Gala. Hashtag power couple." Sapphira dropped the phone on the bed. The screen stared up at her, mocking her. It wasn't just shame. It was betrayal. He wasn't working late. He was taking another woman to the most important night of his career, a night happening at the Hayes Plaza. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. The Hayes Plaza was the jewel in her family's crown. It was the hotel where she had spent her childhood, running through the corridors, while her father, Andrew Hayes, took meetings in the presidential suite. She looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror. She saw the tired eyes, the swollen belly. But beneath that, she saw something else. She saw the jawline of Andrew Hayes. She saw the steel that had built an empire. "No," she said aloud to the empty room. "Not tonight." She walked deeper into the closet, past the maternity wear to the back, where she kept a garment bag she hadn't touched in years. She unzipped it. Inside was a simple, elegant midnight blue gown. It was silk cut on the bias. It was expensive, but understated. It had been designed by Vera Wang specifically for Sapphira's 21st birthday. It was loose enough to fit over her bump, she hoped. She stripped off the sweatpants. She went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. She didn't have a glam squad. She didn't have Tiffany's team of stylists. She pulled her dark hair back into a severe, elegant chignon. She applied red lipstick war paint. She put on the dress. It was tight around the chest and the belly, but the silk draped beautifully. It didn't hide her pregnancy. It framed it. She couldn't wear heels, so she slid her swollen feet into a pair of jeweled flat sandals. She grabbed her clutch. She didn't call a driver. Jason had taken the town car. She opened her Uber app. Destination, the Hayes Plaza, 5th Avenue. As the elevator descended, Sapphira touched the locket around her neck. Inside was a picture of her late father. "Help me be strong, Dad," she whispered, "because I'm about to walk into the lion's den." She didn't know that she wasn't just walking into a party. She was walking into an execution, and she was supposed to be the victim. The Hayes Plaza loomed over 5th Avenue like a fortress of limestone and light. The entrance was a chaotic ballet of black SUVs, flashbulbs, and red velvet ropes. The paparazzi were screaming names, desperate for a shot of anyone famous. When Sapphira's Uber, a dented Toyota Camry, pulled up behind a line of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces, the doorman actually frowned. "You can't stop here!" The doorman barked, waving the driver on. "I'm attending the gala," Sapphira said, pushing the door open before the driver could drive off. She stepped out. The contrast was immediate. The women around her were towering glamazons in 6-inch stilettos and dresses that cost more than a car. Sapphira in her flats and vintage gown, looking visibly heavily pregnant, stood out like a sore thumb. She walked toward the red velvet rope. A security guard, a burly man with an earpiece and a clipboard, stepped in front of her. He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her stomach with a look of distaste. "Staff entrance is around the back, honey," he said, not even checking his list. "Kitchen crew and housekeeping enter on 58th Street. Sapphira stiffened. "I am not staff. I am a guest. My husband is Jason Miller." The guard snorted. He looked at his list, then back at her. "Jason Miller is already inside, and he's checked in with his guest, +1 only. No extras." "I am his wife," Sapphira said, her voice rising slightly. "Look, lady." The guard sighed, crossing his arms. "I don't know what kind of baby mama drama you're trying to start, but this is a high-profile event. We don't do domestic disputes on the red carpet. Move along before I have you escorted off the property." A few people in the line giggled. A woman in a silver dress whispered to her partner, "Can you imagine showing up like that desperate?" Sapphira felt the tears prickling her eyes. This was a mistake. She should turn around. She was just embarrassing herself. Then a voice boomed from the top of the stairs. "Is there a problem here?" It was an older man, impeccably dressed in a tailcoat, with silver hair combed back perfectly. Sapphira looked up. Her heart stopped. It was Henry Caldwell. He had been the head concierge at the Hayes Plaza for 40 years. He had taught Sapphira how to skip stones in Central Park when her father was busy. He was the one who snuck her extra chocolates from the kitchen. Caldwell walked down the steps, his face stern. The security guard straightened up. "Just handling a disturbance, Mr. Caldwell. This woman claims to be with Mr. Miller, but—" Caldwell looked at Sapphira. For a second there was no recognition. It had been 4 years since she left. She was heavier, pregnant, tired. Then he saw her eyes, the haze grey eyes. Sapphira gave him a microscopic shake of her head. "Don't blow my cover." "Not yet." Caldwell, a professional to his bones, didn't blink. He didn't gasp. He didn't bow. But his demeanor changed instantly from stern authority to absolute deference. "There is no need for a disturbance," Caldwell said, his voice smooth as velvet. He looked at the guard. "I will personally verify this guest's credentials inside. Step aside." "But sir, the list—" "Step aside." Caldwell's voice dropped an octave. The guard moved. Caldwell extended an arm to Sapphira. "Madam, please, the stairs can be treacherous." Sapphira took his arm. She felt him squeeze her hand, gently, a silent message of support. "Thank you, Henry," she whispered, as they ascended the stairs away from the cameras. "Miss Sapphira," he whispered back, keeping his eyes forward. "It has been too long. Your father would be very happy to see you here. Though I dare say, you are not here for the canapes." "No, Henry," she said, her grip tightening on his arm. "I'm here to find my husband." "Mr. Miller is in the grand ballroom," Caldwell murmured, as they reached the gilded revolving doors. "Table 4, center stage. He is accompanied." "I know. If you need anything at all, you know I am at your service." "Thank you, Henry. Just don't tell the general manager I'm here yet. I want to handle this myself." Caldwell bowed his head. "As you wish." He opened the doors for her. The grand ballroom hit her like a physical force. The scent of expensive perfume, the sound of a live string quartet playing a pop song covered the clinking of crystal. Under the massive Swarovski chandelier, which Sapphira remembered helping her father pick out from a catalogue in Milan, 300 of New York's elite were mingling. Sapphira took a deep breath. She navigated through the crowd, shielding her belly from errant elbows. She felt invisible. Waiters looked through her. Guests brushed past her as if she were furniture. And then she saw them. Table 4 was prime real estate right next to the dance floor. Jason was sitting there laughing, his head thrown back. He looked radiant, victorious. He held a glass of scotch in one hand, and sitting on the arm of his chair, hand draped possessively over his shoulder, was Tiffany Sinclair. Tiffany was wearing a dress that was barely there, shimmering red sequins, backless with a slit that went up to her hip. She leaned down and whispered something in Jason's ear. Jason smirked and kissed her on the cheek. It wasn't the kiss of a friend. It was the kiss of a man who had forgotten he was married. Sapphira felt the room spin. The noise faded into a dull roar. She walked forward. She didn't run. She walked with the plodding, heavy steps of a woman carrying life toward the man who was destroying hers. She stopped 3 feet from the table. "Jason." Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through their laughter like a knife. Jason froze. The smile didn't just drop from his face. It vanished. He turned slowly, his eyes widening in pure horror. Tiffany looked up, blinking her false lashes. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. "Oh, look," Tiffany said, her voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. The little wife found her way out of the kitchen. The music didn't stop, but the silence around table 4 rippled outward like a shockwave. People at nearby tables, CEOs, hedge fund managers, socialites, turned their heads, sensing the scent of blood. Jason scrambled to stand up, his face flushing a deep, mottled crimson. He looked at Sapphira, not with concern, but with panicked fury. He smoothed his tuxedo jacket, glancing nervously at the surrounding guests. "Sapphira!" He hissed, his voice low and tight. "What are you doing here?" "You look at you." Sapphira stood her ground, though her legs were trembling. "I found the invitation, Jason. The one you hid. The one that says, 'and guest.' I assumed that meant your wife." Tiffany laughed again. It was a light, tinkling sound, practiced and hollow. She remained seated on the arm of Jason's chair, swirling her champagne glass. She looked Sapphira up and down with the clinical detachment of a butcher eyeing a slab of low-grade meat. "Oh, sweetie," Tiffany purred. Jason didn't hide it. He was trying to spare you the embarrassment. "Look around. This isn't a mommy and me class. This is the big leagues." She took a sip of her drink, her eyes gleaming maliciously. "Besides, look at you. You're bursting out of the seams. It's hardly the aesthetic for the Obsidian Gala, is it? You look like you stumbled out of a Walmart." A few people at the next table chuckled. Sapphira felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "Jason," she said, ignoring Tiffany, "we are going home. Now." Jason looked at Tiffany, then back at Sapphira. He saw Tiffany's expectant look a challenge. If he left with his frumpy, pregnant wife, he lost face. He lost the power couple image. He hardened his jaw. "No, Sapphira, I am working. You are making a scene. You need to leave. Call an Uber. Go home." "Working?" Sapphira pointed at Tiffany. "Is she work?" "Tiffany is a strategic partner." Jason lied, though his eyes darted away. "Her father is crucial to the merger. You wouldn't understand. You don't understand business, Sapphira. You just edit papers." The dismissal stung worse than a slap. "I don't understand business," Sapphira whispered. "I built you," she wanted to scream. "I signed the check that paid for the chair you're sitting in. Go home," Jason snapped, turning his back on her to face Tiffany. "I'll deal with you later." Sapphira stood there frozen. The rejection was total. He had chosen the illusion of power over the reality of their marriage. She turned to leave her vision blurry with tears. As she turned, Tiffany stood up. "Let me help you out, honey," Tiffany said, feigning sweetness. "The exit is that way." Tiffany stepped forward, and as she did, she stumbled. It was a theatrical, clumsy movement. Her hand jerked forward, and the contents of her full champagne flute, sticky, sugary, expensive vintage brut, splashed directly onto Sapphira's chest. The cold liquid soaked instantly into the blue silk. It dripped down her baby bump, creating a massive dark stain on the vintage fabric. "Oops!" Tiffany gasped, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. Her eyes were dancing with delight. "Oh my God, I am so clumsy. But honestly, it probably improves the dress." The crowd erupted. It wasn't just a chuckle this time. It was full-blown laughter. They saw a pathetic, wet, pregnant woman being put in her place by the alpha female. Sapphira gasped, the cold liquid shocking her skin. She looked at Jason. Jason didn't rush to get a napkin. He didn't yell at Tiffany. He reached out and steadied Tiffany. "Are you okay, Tiff?" Jason asked the mistress. "Did you spill any on your shoes?" That was the moment, the exact moment the last thread of love in Sapphira's heart snapped. It didn't break with a bang. It broke with a quiet, icy finality. She looked at her husband, a man worrying about a mistress's shoes, while his pregnant wife stood dripping in humiliation. Sapphira wiped a drop of champagne from her cheek. She didn't cry. The tears evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard rage. The haze rage. "Thank you, Tiffany," Sapphira said. Her voice was suddenly steady. It carried a timbre that hadn't been there before the authority of a woman who owns the building. The laughter died down slightly. There was something in her tone that unsettled them. "Thank you for showing me exactly who my husband is," Sapphira continued. "And Jason," she looked him dead in the eye. "You're right, I don't understand your business. But I know mine. Enjoy your night. It's going to be very memorable." She turned on her heel. She didn't run. She walked away with her head high, the stain on her dress like a badge of war. As she walked toward the double doors, she heard Tiffany whisper loudly, "God, what a drama queen. Finally she's gone." But Sapphira wasn't leaving. She was just going to the war room. Sapphira didn't exit the hotel. Instead, she turned sharp left toward the service elevators. A security guard started to move to intercept her. "Ma'am, you can't be back here." "Code Indigo," Sapphira said. The guard froze. "Excuse me. Code Indigo. Hayes. Override 77 Alpha." These were the emergency override codes for the Hayes Plaza security team codes that hadn't changed since her father established them. They were meant for the family only. The guard touched his earpiece, his face paling. He looked at her, then at the tablet in his hand. A red alert flashed on his screen. "VIP on premises. Stand down." He stepped back, head bowed. "Right this way, Ms. Hayes." The elevator doors opened instantly. Sapphira stepped in. "Penthouse office. And get Henry Caldwell. Tell him to meet me there in 3 minutes. Tell him to bring the ledger." "Yes, ma'am." The doors closed, shutting out the noise of the party. Sapphira leaned against the mirrored wall, taking deep breaths. She looked at her reflection. The dress was ruined. Her hair was messy. She reached up and pulled the pins out of her hair, letting the dark waves fall around her shoulders. She grabbed a towel from the service cart in the elevator and wiped the champagne off her skin. The elevator dinged at the top floor. This wasn't a guest floor. This was the executive suite, the nerve center of the Hayes global empire. The hallway was lined with mahogany and portraits of her ancestors. She walked past them, her grandfather, her great-aunt, her father. They all seemed to be watching her. Andrew Hayes used to say, "Never let them see you bleed, unless it's to lure the sharks." She pushed open the double oak doors to the main office. It was exactly as she had left it 4 years ago. The massive desk, the view of Central Park, the smell of old books and leather. She walked behind the desk and sat in the high-backed leather chair. It groaned, accepting its owner. A moment later, the door opened. Henry Caldwell walked in. He wasn't alone. Behind him was a woman in a sharp grey suit, Eleanor Vance, the Hayes family's chief legal counsel, and arguably the most terrified lawyer in New York. "Sapphira," Eleanor breathed, clutching a briefcase. "My God, we thought you were never coming back. We've been holding the trust in abeyance as you asked, but—" "I'm back, Elle," Sapphira said. She rested her hands on her stomach. "And I'm done hiding." Caldwell placed a thick, leather-bound book on the desk. The ledger. It contained the real-time ownership details of every asset in the Hayes portfolio. "I need a status report, Henry." Sapphira said, her voice clipped and professional, specifically regarding Nexus Tech and the Sinclair estate. Caldwell opened the book, flipping pages with white-gloved hands. "As you know, Aurora Holdings, your shell company, owns 60% of Nexus Tech. Mr. Miller retains the title of CEO only at the pleasure of the board, which is you." "And the Sinclairs?" Sapphira asked. "Robert Sinclair leveraged his entire portfolio to finance the construction of the Sinclair Tower in Miami," Eleanor chimed in. "The loan was high risk. The bank that underwrote it was Hayes Limit. He missed his last 2 payments. Technically, Sapphira, you own his debt. You could foreclose on the Sinclair family assets tomorrow." Sapphira's fingers traced the leather of the desk. "And tonight, who is running the auction?" "Mr. Miller is the keynote speaker," Caldwell said, a hint of distaste in his voice. "He is auctioning off a mystery investment opportunity to raise capital for Nexus. He claims it's a partnership with Aurora Holdings. He's selling shares of my company without my permission. He assumes Aurora is a silent partner who won't object," Eleanor noted. "He's desperate for cash to cover the Sinclair merger costs." Sapphira spun the chair around to look out at the city lights. Jason wasn't just cheating on her. He was stealing from her. He was using her money to impress his mistress, whose family was broke, and living on borrowed time, her borrowed time. It was almost funny. They were all dancing on a floor she owned, drinking wine she paid for trying to spend money that belonged to her. "Henry," Sapphira said, turning back. "Do we have a clean dress in the suite? Something commanding." Caldwell smiled, a genuine warm smile. "Your mother's black velvet gown is in preservation in the closet, Miss Hayes. It should accommodate the baby beautifully. Get it." "And Sapphira," Eleanor asked, opening her laptop, "what do you want to do about Nexus and the Sinclairs?" Sapphira picked up a heavy fountain pen, her father's pen. "Draft 2 documents, Eleanor. First, a motion to dissolve the CEO position of Nexus Tech, effective immediately due to breach of fiduciary duty." Eleanor typed furiously. "And the second, a notice of immediate foreclosure on the Sinclair estate." Sapphira stood up. The pain in her back was gone, replaced by adrenaline. "They wanted a show," she said, her eyes flashing steel grey. "They wanted to laugh at the poor pregnant housewife. So let's go downstairs and give them a finale they will never forget." "Shall I call security to escort you to the stage?" Caldwell asked. "No," Sapphira said. "I want the microphone turned on the moment I walk through those doors, and Henry cut the music." "With pleasure, madam." Sapphira walked toward the private bathroom to change. The transformation was about to happen. Sapphira Miller, the tired wife, was dead. Sapphira Hayes was about to be reborn. Back in the grand ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted from cocktail chatter to rapt attention. The lights had dimmed, leaving only a spotlight trained on the center stage. Jason Miller stood there looking every inch the master of the universe. He gripped the podium, his smile dazzling the room. Beside the stage, Tiffany Sinclair sat on a velvet stool, acting the part of the supportive First Lady, holding a glass of champagne and winking at photographers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jason's voice boomed through the speakers. "Tonight isn't just about celebration, it's about the future. Nexus Tech has grown from a garage project to a market leader, but we are hungry for more." He paused for effect. The crowd leaned in. "I have been authorized by our primary investor, the reclusive Aurora Holdings, to offer a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Tonight we are auctioning a 5% equity stake in Nexus Tech. The starting bid is $5 million. A murmur went through the crowd. $5 million was steep, but Nexus was hot. "Do I hear $5 million?" Jason asked, scanning the room. $5 million, shouted a hedge fund manager from the back. $6 million, countered Robert Sinclair, Tiffany's father. He was a portly man, with a red face, sweating profusely in his tuxedo. He was bidding money he didn't have, trying to pump up the value of his future son-in-law's company. "I have $6 million from the legendary Robert Sinclair." Jason grinned. "Do I hear 7? 7, yelled another voice. Tiffany clapped excitedly. They were winning. They were going to be rich, powerful, and unstoppable. The little wife and her stained dress were a distant memory, a piece of trash they had already taken out. Jason was high on the adrenaline. 7 million going once, 7 million going twice. Do I hear clack? The sound was loud, sudden, and jarring. It was the sound of the main breaker being thrown. Every light in the ballroom instantly died. The music cut out with a dying warp sound. The microphone went dead. Total darkness engulfed the room. "What is going on?" Tiffany's shrill voice pierced the blackness. "Jason, fix it." "Stay calm, everyone," Jason yelled, though his voice was thin without the amplification. "Just a technical glitch at the haze. Typical old building." Then a single sound cut through the murmuring crowd. Thump, thump, thump. It was the rhythmic, heavy sound of a cane striking the floor, accompanied by the rustle of heavy fabric. A single spotlight snapped on. It didn't hit the stage. It hit the top of the grand staircase at the back of the ballroom. Standing there was a vision that made the entire room gasp. It was Saphira. But it wasn't the Saphira from 30 minutes ago. The messy hair was gone, brushed into cascading dark waves that framed a face carved from marble. The red lipstick was reapplied sharp and dangerous, and the dress. She was wearing the raven velvet. It was a legendary gown, a family heirloom made of black silk velvet that absorbed the light. It had long sleeves, a high neck, and a back that plunged dangerously low. It was tight, hugging every curve of her body, and it accentuated her 8-month baby bump, not as a burden, but as a symbol of fertility and power. She looked like a queen carrying an heir. Around her neck sat the haze diamond, a rock the size of a quail's egg that hadn't been seen in public since her mother died. She held a black cane with a silver handle, not because she needed it, but because it looked like a scepter. Henry Caldwell stood a step behind her hands, clasped behind his back, looking like a royal guard. Saphira took a step down. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. "Who is that?" someone whispered. "Is that the wife?" Saphira descended the stairs. She didn't look at the floor. She looked straight at Jason. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, the crowd parted for her. It wasn't polite. It was instinctual, like a school of fish parting for a shark. She walked straight to the stage. Jason stood frozen at the podium. He looked at her, blinking. He recognized the face, but he couldn't reconcile it with the woman he bullied at home. This woman radiated a cold, terrifying energy. "Sapphira," he whispered off mic. "What the hell are you wearing? Where did you get that?" Sapphira ignored him. She walked up the stairs to the stage. She moved past Tiffany, who was staring with her mouth open. Sapphira reached the podium. She looked at Jason, then gently, firmly took the dead microphone from his hand. She tapped it once. Thump! Thump! The sound echoed through the massive speakers. The audio was back on, but only for her. "I believe," Sapphira said, her voice smooth, deep, and echoing with authority, "that there has been a misunderstanding regarding the auction." The crowd stared. Jason tried to grab the mic back. "Sapphira, get off the stage. You're manic. You're embarrassing yourself." Sapphira turned to him. She didn't step back. She leaned in, her voice amplified for the whole room to hear. "Sit down, Jason, before you fall down." Jason blinked, stunned by the sheer command in her voice. He stumbled back a step, almost tripping over a monitor wedge. Sapphira turned back to the audience. She scanned the room, making eye contact with the titans of industry she had known since she was a child. "My husband," she began, the word dripping with irony, "is auctioning off 5% of Nexus Tech. He claims this sale is authorized by Aurora Holdings." She paused. "I am here to inform you that Aurora Holdings authorizes no such sale. In fact, Aurora Holdings is freezing all assets of Nexus Tech, effective immediately pending a forensic accounting audit for embezzlement." A collective gasp ripped through the room. "Embezzlement!" Jason shrieked, finding his voice. He lunged forward. "You crazy bitch! You don't know what you're talking about. Who do you think you are?" "Who am I?" Sapphira smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Henry?" she asked without looking back. Henry Caldwell stepped out of the shadows, holding a tablet connected to the room's main screen. "Yes, Ms. Hayes." "Ms. Hayes." The name hung in the air. Behind Sapphira, the massive projector screen flickered to life. It showed a complex corporate structure chart. At the bottom was Nexus Tech. Above it, Aurora Holdings. And above Aurora Holdings, a single name, Sapphira Elizabeth Hayes. "Oh my God," a woman in the front row whispered. "She's Andrew Hayes's daughter. She's the heiress. She owns the building." Another man said, his face paling. "She owns the whole damn block." Jason stared at the screen. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed the podium to stay upright. "No," he muttered. "No, that's impossible. You're poor. You clip coupons. You wear sweatpants. I wear sweatpants because I'm pregnant." "Jason," Sapphira said, her voice icy. "I lived simply because I wanted to know if you loved me or my money. I think tonight gave me the answer." She turned to the audience. "I am Sapphira Hayes, sole owner of Aurora Holdings, which means I own 60% of Nexus Tech." She turned back to Jason. "And as the majority shareholder, I am making a motion to remove the current CEO for gross misconduct, unauthorized trading, and moral turpitude." She looked at her lawyer, Eleanor, who was standing by the stage. "Do I have a second?" "Seconded," Eleanor called out clearly. "Motion carried," Sapphira said. "Jason, you're fired. Security will escort you out. You can leave your company credit card on the podium." The room erupted. People were pulling out phones, recording, streaming. This was the bloodbath of the century. But Sapphira wasn't done. Tiffany Sinclair, who had been shrinking into her seat, suddenly stood up. She was shaking her face, a mask of ruined mascara and panic. You can't do this," Tiffany screamed. "You're just a jealous fat cow. Jason is a genius. We don't need your money. My father will buy you out." Sapphira slowly turned her head toward Tiffany. She looked at the mistress with a mix of pity and disgust. "Your father?" Sapphira asked. She nodded to Henry. The screen behind her changed. It now displayed a bank document. Notice of default the Sinclair estate. "Your father," Sapphira said, addressing Tiffany, but looking at Robert Sinclair in the audience, "has missed 3 consecutive payments on the loan for the Sinclair Tower, a loan underwritten by the Hayes Trust." Robert Sinclair was trying to sneak out the side exit. "Mr. Sinclair," Sapphira called out, "please don't leave. We have papers for you." She looked back at Tiffany. "Technically, Tiffany, I own your apartment. I own your father's boat. And as of 8 p.m. tonight, due to the default clause," Sapphira checked her watch, "I own the dress you're wearing. It was purchased on a company card that is now Hayes' property." Tiffany looked down at her red dress in horror. "I won't ask for it back," Sapphira said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "It has cheap champagne on it. You can keep it. Consider it a severance package." Tiffany burst into tears. She collapsed onto the stool, sobbing uncontrollably. Jason was shaking his head, looking from the screen to Sapphira. The reality was crashing down on him. The billions he thought he was chasing. He had been sleeping next to them for 3 years, and he had thrown it away for a flirty blonde and a night of ego. "Sapphira," Jason choked out. He tried to smile that charming, boyish smile that had worked on her in the coffee shop. He took a step toward her. "Baby, honey, look, this is a lot. But we can talk about this. We're a family. We have a baby coming. You don't want to stress the baby." He reached out to touch her arm. Sapphira didn't flinch. But before he could touch her, a hand clamped onto Jason's shoulder. It was the head of security, the same guard who had tried to stop Sapphira earlier. He looked terrified of Sapphira now. "Don't touch Ms. Hayes," the guard growled. Jason looked at the guard, then at Sapphira. "Sapphira, please. I love you. It was a mistake. She meant nothing. I did it for us, to get connections for the company." Sapphira looked at him. For a second, her eyes softened. She remembered the man who used to make her grilled cheese sandwiches when she was sick. Then she looked at the stain on her hand, where the champagne had dried. "You didn't do it for us, Jason," she said quietly. "You did it because you're small. And you needed to feel big." She stepped back. "Get him out of my hotel." "No, Sapphira, you can't," Jason was screaming as 2 guards dragged him backward. "I'm the CEO. I'm the father, Sapphira." His voice faded as the double doors swung shut behind him. The ballroom was dead silent. 300 people stared at Sapphira. She felt the exhaustion hit her. The adrenaline was fading. Her back throbbed. She leaned heavily on the cane. Henry Caldwell was at her side instantly. "Madam, are you all right?" Sapphira looked at the crowd. She saw the awe in their eyes, the respect, but she didn't care about them. She grabbed the microphone one last time. "Please enjoy the dessert," she said. "The crème brûlée is excellent. My father loved it." She dropped the mic on the podium. Thud. She took Henry's arm. "Take me home, Henry. I think I need a pickle." The heavy oak doors of the Hayes Plaza swung shut, sealing the chaos of the ballroom behind them. The silence of the limousine was instant and absolute, a protective cocoon against the flashing lights of the paparazzi, swarming the curb. Sapphira sank into the plush leather seat of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, the adrenaline that had fueled her performance finally draining away. In its place came a bone-deep exhaustion. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling just slightly. The black velvet of her mother's gown felt heavy now, like armor after a battle is won. Henry Caldwell sat in the front passenger seat, but he turned around, his expression filled with a rare, naked pride. He held out a crystal tumbler of sparkling water and a small jar of artisanal cornichons, the specific craving Sapphira had mentioned in passing weeks ago. "For the victor?" he said softly. Sapphira took the jar, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "I don't feel like a victor, Henry. I feel numb." "That is the anesthesia of shock, madam," Henry replied. "The pain will come later. But so will the healing. You severed the limb to save the body. It was necessary." Sapphira took a bite of a pickle, the sour crunch grounding her. She looked out the tinted window as the city blurred past the city she owned, pieces of the city her husband had tried to conquer with lies. "Take me to the penthouse," she said, her voice hardening. "But not to sleep. I want the locks changed before I even step out of the elevator. I want his biometric data scrubbed from the building's server. If he tries to enter the lobby, I want the silent alarm to trip." "It is already done," Henry assured her. "I took the liberty of deactivating his key fob the moment you dropped the microphone. Mr. Miller is currently standing on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue with a deactivated phone and a cancelled credit card." Sapphira closed her eyes, letting out a long, shuddering breath. Good. The next 48 hours were a blur of media frenzy. The headline on the New York Post was "Brutal and Brilliant. Hayes Silver Heiress Crushes Cheating Husband in Billion-Dollar Reveal." The Daily Mail ran a 4-page spread, analyzing every second of the video, bringing in body language experts to dissect Jason's terror and Tiffany's humiliation. But Sapphira didn't read the papers. She was in the war room at Vance and Associates. 3 days after the gala, Jason was finally granted a meeting. He arrived at the law firm looking like a shadow of the man he had been. He hadn't shaved, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing a hoodie because he had been effectively locked out of his wardrobe. He had spent the last 3 nights sleeping on a friend's couch, a friend who was now ignoring his calls because no one wanted to cross Sapphira Hayes. He was led into the conference room. Sapphira wasn't there. Instead, Eleanor Vance sat at the head of the long glass table, flanked by 3 forensic accountants and a stack of files thick enough to stop a bullet. Jason slumped into a chair, trying to summon a shred of his old arrogance. "Where is she? I want to talk to my wife." "I have rights, Eleanor." "You have the right to remain silent," Eleanor said, not looking up from her laptop. "And I strongly suggest you use it, though I'm not the police. Yet." "Look," Jason stammered, leaning forward. "I can explain the accounts. It was business development. You know how it is, you have to spend money to project success. The dinners, the trips. It was all to build the Nexus brand. Sapphira doesn't understand the optics of the tech world." "The optics?" Eleanor finally looked up her glasses, sliding down her nose. She picked up a file. "Let's discuss optics. You spent $45,000 of corporate funds on a lease for a Mercedes G-Wagon registered to Tiffany Sinclair. You purchased a diamond tennis bracelet from Cartier, listed in the ledger as server maintenance hardware. You funded a week-long trip to Cabo San Lucas, listed as a developer retreat. Yet the flight manifest lists only 2 passengers, Jason Miller and Tiffany Sinclair. Jason swallowed hard, his face paling. I intended to pay it back. Once the IPO hit, I was going to replace every cent." "There is no IPO, Jason," Eleanor said, her voice cutting like a guillotine. "Sapphira has dissolved the board. Nexus Tech is being absorbed into Aurora Holdings as a distressed asset. We are stripping it for parts. And you are being personally sued for embezzlement, corporate fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty." "Sued?" Jason's voice cracked, rising an octave. "I'm her husband. She can't sue me. We're married. Half of everything is mine. I know the law." "Eleanor, New York is an equitable distribution state. I'm entitled to half her earnings during the marriage. Eleanor smiled. It was a terrifying expression, a shark sensing blood in the water. Ah, yes. The marriage. Eleanor slid a single crisp document across the table. Do you remember the day you proposed in that coffee shop in Brooklyn? Yeah, so what? You insisted on a prenuptial agreement, Eleanor reminded him. You were so worried that Sapphira's freelance debt and lack of career would drag down your rising star. You made her sign your lawyer's standard boilerplate agreement. Jason nodded slowly. I remember. It protects premarital assets. But Nexus grew during the marriage. That's marital property. It would be, Eleanor corrected, if you had read the shadow clause on page 40. A clause Sapphira's father insisted be added to every Hayes marriage contract, no matter how humble the partner seems. Jason grabbed the document, flipping frantically to the back. The clause states, Eleanor recited from memory, that in the event of proven infidelity or criminal misconduct by one party, all rights to marital assets are forfeited, and the offending party assumes full liability for their own debts. Furthermore, it triggers an immediate dissolution of any joint ventures. Jason stared at the paper. The words swam before his eyes. He had signed his own death warrant 3 years ago because he was too arrogant to read the fine print of a woman he thought was a nobody. This is a trap, he whispered. No, Jason. It's insurance. And you just crashed the car. Eleanor slid a second document across the table. Sapphira is generous, however. She offers a settlement. Settlement? Sign this divorce decree. You waive all claims to the Hayes fortune. You waive alimony. You admit to adultery. You grant Sapphira full legal and physical custody of the unborn child. In exchange, Eleanor paused for effect. Sapphira will drop the criminal charges. She will not send the father of her child to federal prison. She will simply erase you. Custody, Jason choked out. I want to see my kid. Supervised visitation, 4 hours every other weekend, subject to random drug testing and a psychiatric evaluation, and you are barred from coming within 500 feet of Hayes Plaza. Jason looked at the pen. He looked at the forensic accountants who were ready to hand their findings to the district attorney. He realized with a sickening thud that he had never been the player. He had been the pawn. With a shaking hand, he picked up the pen. He signed his name. It was the last autograph Jason Miller would ever sign as a relevant man. 6 weeks later, the pain was unlike anything Sapphira had ever known. It was a tidal wave crushing and consuming her. She gripped the metal rails of the hospital bed at Mount Sinai, her knuckles white sweat plastering her dark hair to her forehead. One more push, Sapphira. You're almost there, the obstetrician urged. I can't, Sapphira sobbed, her voice breaking. I can't do it. It hurts too much. I can't do it alone. She turned her head, instinctively looking for a hand to hold. For a fleeting, heartbreaking second, she expected to see Jason. She expected the man who had promised to be there for this moment. But the space beside the bed was empty of him. Then a hand took hers. It was warm, firm, and calloused. You are a Hayes, a voice whispered. Sapphira looked up. Henry Caldwell stood there wearing a sterile blue medical gown over his suit. His eyes, usually so reserved, were fierce with emotion. You have never done anything alone, Miss Sapphira, Henry said, his voice thick. We are all here. The spirit of your father is here. You are strong enough. You are the foundation. Sapphira squeezed his hand. She drew a breath that went down to her soul. She realized then that she didn't need a husband to be whole. She didn't need Jason's validation. She had her bloodline. She had her loyalty. She had herself. She screamed a primal sound of release and power and pushed with everything she had left. The cry that followed was the sweetest sound in the world, a high, indignant wail of new life announcing its arrival. "It's a boy!" The doctor smiled, placing the warm, wet, wriggling bundle onto Sapphira's chest. Sapphira looked down. The baby was red and squalling, furious at the cold air of the world. He blinked, opening his eyes for the first time. They were grey. Haze, grey. Sapphira began to cry, happy, cleansing tears. She kissed his damp forehead. "Hello, Andrew," she whispered. "My little king. Welcome to your kingdom." 1 year later, the Obsidian Gala had returned to the Hayes Plaza. The grand ballroom was a kaleidoscope of diamonds, designer silk, and the heavy scent of expensive lilies. The orchestra played a waltz, and the elite of New York mingled their laughter, mingling with the clink of crystal. But the center of gravity in the room had shifted. It wasn't the stage anymore. It was table 1. Sapphira Hayes sat there, looking like a deity who had descended to earth. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, structured and regal, a stark contrast to the soft blue silk she had worn during her humiliation a year prior. Around her neck, the Hayes diamond glittered a warning and a promise. In her lap sat 1-year-old Andrew. He was dressed in a miniature bespoke tuxedo, happily gumming on a silver spoon. He was the undisputed star of the evening. Billionaires were lining up just to wave at him. "Ms. Hayes." Sapphira looked up. A man in a sharp suit stood there, the CEO of a rival tech firm. He looked nervous. I wanted to say," the man stammered, "that Nexus, Aurora's tech division, has been performing miraculously. The new ethical guidelines you implemented. Brilliant. I was wondering if you'd be open to a partnership." Sapphira studied him. She didn't smile to please him. She smiled because she held the cards. "Send a proposal to Eleanor Vance," she said coolly. "If the numbers work, we'll talk. But know this, I don't do silent partnerships anymore. If my name is on it, I run it." The CEO nodded vigorously. "Of course. Understood. Thank you, Sapphira." "That's Ms. Hayes," Henry Caldwell corrected, gently appearing from behind her with a fresh bottle of sparkling water. "Ms. Hayes," the CEO corrected, bowing slightly before retreating. Sapphira turned to Henry, raising an eyebrow. "You enjoy that, don't you?" "Immensely, madam." Her phone buzzed on the table. A news alert. Breaking former tech darling Jason Miller, evicted from Queen's studio apartment. Starts GoFundMe for legal fees. Below it, a smaller headline, Tiffany Sinclair's Influencer Academy, shut down by FTC for fraud. Sapphira stared at the screen. She waited for the pang of guilt, or perhaps a surge of triumphant joy. But she felt nothing. They were just ghosts. Characters in a bad novel she had closed long ago. They were irrelevant. She swiped the notification away and locked the phone. She looked down at Andrew. He had dropped the spoon and was reaching for her hand. She laced her fingers through his tiny ones. "We have better things to do than look at the past, don't we, Andrew?" she whispered. She stood up, lifting her son onto her hip. She walked toward the balcony overlooking the ballroom floor. As she approached the railing, the room fell silent. 300 faces turned toward her, not in judgment, but in reverence. Sapphira raised her glass of water. She didn't need a microphone. Her presence filled the room. "To the future," she said clearly, "and to knowing your worth." "To Ms. Hayes," Henry shouted from the back. "To Ms. Hayes." The room roared in unison. Sapphira smiled, holding her son tight. The silence that had once tried to crush her was gone. In its place was a symphony of her own making, and it was beautiful. "Wow," That was the story of Sapphira Hayes, from a humiliated wife covered in cheap champagne to the queen of the empire who took back her crown. It just goes to show that you should never judge a book by its cover or a wife by her sweatpants. Jason and Tiffany learned the hard way that when you play with fire, you don't just get burned. You get evicted, sued, and erased. I love that Sapphira didn't just get revenge. She got justice. She protected her legacy and her son. What would you have done if you were Sapphira? Would you have revealed your identity sooner? Or was waiting for the gala? The perfect move. And do you think Jason deserved a second chance? Or did he get exactly what was coming to him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and comeback, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I'll see you in the next video.